Today we're going to work on an S100 Guitars Eagle logo something or other. Very nice neck. Actually the fingerboard looks really good too. And it looks like it's got some potential. Body though is like that typical cheap Hondo design they were putting out a few years ago for entry-level guitars. This is not my guitar. This is actually a friend brought this by to have this fixed up. I'm going to give it the average Mad Mike treatment, which is going to be, we're going to fix the electrical wiring issues because it's completely jacked up. I mean, there's a grounding problem, the tone pot's all loose, nothing does anything, touching the strings makes noise. There you go. We're going to address the tremolo unit. I'm going to set it up so it actually stays in tune. I'm really good in practicing these because I just did two others. I did my Crate Strat, the Earnhardt Strat, and the Memphis 302HB. I just put a really cool 2-point trem in, and both of those are as stable as they come. This one's got a bridge humbucker in it. I think I'm going to skip wax potting just because I don't think this thing's going to go out live. So I'm going to start dismantling this thing. I'm tearing it down. We're going to give it a full cleanup. I'm going to take that out. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all the strings. I usually do that just by unwinding them slightly and then removing them. I'm not going to show that because, well, you guys pretty much have probably done this before. Okay. Now, the next part is going to be taking the actual pick guard off. So there's a whole pick guard, and there's the first part of our problem, is this wire here that's going from the output jack. And I'm going to take this cheesy stereo jack out, and I'm going to put a real guitar jack in there. I'm going to take all this off, clean the pick guard out, and I'm going to take some of my muffler tape here, or aluminum shielding tape, and I'm going to create a Faraday cage around all the pickups. It usually gets rid of a lot of noise. And you can see standard Stratocaster tremolo. You have this part here, the inertia block, which goes through the body, and then you have 3 springs here to hold it in place. Typically on a guitar like this, I'm going to string it up with 9s, and I'm going to take that center one out because it does that. Because, you know, well, it doesn't need that much tension. And yes, I'm one of the brave / stupid people who does this with their fingers, but I've been doing it this way since I was 14, so sometimes you need a little screwdriver help. Bing! There we go. That's all 3. Those have some nice tension on them, so it really should only need maybe 2 of those to actually be happy. And you can see where the screws for the tremolo have gone through the body. Not the greatest routing job on earth, but you know, that's typical of these inexpensive guitars. So we're going to take this out. That's not getting enough grip. If your screwdriver starts spinning like that, you need a bigger one. And I have a bigger one right over here. Mechanic Supply. There we go. Everything's out of the body. So, the reason I'm taking this out is I'm going to take this whole assembly apart and clean it up. And take all the bridge saddles off because I'm resetting the intonation, redoing the action, all that. You can see it's a thinner than normal Strat body, so the inertia block's a little shorter. And I got some new parts for it. I got it went to Guitar Center, picked up a new tremolo bar for it. Regular 4-in-thread 6mm tremolo bar like you usually get for your Stratocasters from overseas, you know, like your Squire Affinities, and the regular Mad Mike standard 350, 325 OL 9 through 42 light gauge super bullets. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start cleaning this thing up, and I think the best way to go about that would be to disinfect the heck out of it, because I don't even know what's all on this thing. So I usually use one of those. I just use Lysol disinfectant wipes. You can get them at Costco in a huge number. And I just go around the body, and you can see all the dirt just coming right off. It's like night and day. I also do this, and the shielding stuff will actually adhere to it a lot better too. That's why I get the inside of the cavities. It's a lot easier to adhere tape to something that's not covered in dust and dirt. Just cleaning up all the cavities, getting rid of all the dust and the dirt inside of this thing. It's really not that bad looking. It actually looks to be in almost new condition once you get all the layers of dust and dirt off. For those of you that wonder what that white stuff is, sometimes when you look inside of an electric guitar that's got the pickguard, you know, that little white stuff, no, the person has not been storing their cocaine in the electronics cavity. That's the polishing compound from when they were busy buffing the body at the factory. Just a funny myth, but I found out a long time ago that it was more than just me that thought that the first time I ever took a pickguard off of an electric guitar when I was, you know, pubescent kid. There we go. Yeah, so it's looking nice and clean on that side. We're gonna do the sides. I'm gonna do the back. I'm gonna probably do the desk under it. The horns are awful. Alright, so now I got my microfiber polishing cloth. I'm just gonna rub that on the body. Yeah, looking at this thing, I'm probably not going to have to polish it out, though. Even with the rough spots under the pickguard, it really looks nice. Using some of this on the back, actually, because this is what I use for polishing guitars, rubbing compound. I use 3M. And I just rub it on the body. Here, right now, I'm going to start the shielding. For shielding, typically how I do that is I start with the sides first, and then I put the rest. And I'm going to use up all this stuff first, all the wrinkled stuff. For this, I'm going to set this part aside, and I'm going to start on the vibrato unit, and I'm just going to clean that up all nice and good, and then we'll do the electronics. This is your standard issue Stratocaster vibrato unit. pretty much. First thing I do is I'm going to clean it up by taking it apart. Taking the rest of it apart. I just want to make sure I get the bottom of the tremolo unit all nice and clean. There we go. Get rid of all that dirt and gunk and garbage that accumulates over the years. There we go. It's all cleaned up. Probably rub it with the other dryer rag now. It is embedded now with a little bit of that polishing compound, so it'll look even nicer. And then we're going to put it back together. I'm going to clean all the saddles real quick, make sure they have all the gunk removed and dirt and whatnot. Very particular about that. Yeah, keeping your vibrato bridge clean is actually very important if you're actually going to use the tremolo bar, because if it's not clean, various things can happen. Pivot posts can get dirty, strings will stick in the same position, the guitar will go sharp, your other issues is things can get hung up in the nut. So I just like to make sure everything's good and clean before I put it back together. Do all the screws right here. This one especially, because this one was, I think, the one for the high E that was sticking. It was particularly dirty. I like to make sure all the stuff looks good when I'm done. Yeah. So there we go. Put them in there, spin them with the screwdriver a couple times. Get rid of all the dirt and the threads. Make them. I like to clean up my hardware. I like my stuff to look good when I'm done. I'm sure you're probably falling asleep by now. If I decide to edit this and it makes no sense, well, let me just tell you, at this point I'm at the 46-minute marker. But we're getting close. Okay. Now, I'm going to put the tremolo back together. So you got the screw, goes through the hole back here. Quick way to do it, I always make sure that fat part, the spring, because these are tapered, I always like to put that towards, I like to put the tapered part towards the back. High E is going to go about there. Yeah, you can see none of those saddles are level. I'm very particular about those. Scoot the D string back a little bit more. This one goes back even more, because this is an unwound G that we're going to be using. Usually scoot that one about level with B, maybe a little bit forward, maybe a little bit back, depending on how I feel that day. A goes back about here, and low E goes all the way back about there. And with low E, you want to be careful because that screw is darn near close to it, so if I put too heavy a string in there, that can actually saw through it using the vibrato. Sometimes in those cases, I take them off. Sometimes in those cases, I'll saw some of the screw off or change some of its positioning. And you want to make sure all the saddles are level, because if you don't, then you're going to have kind of similar problems to the Jaguar and Jazzmaster. To take apart and shield the pickguard and clean that up. So you have a switch tip here. These are very tricky to get off sometimes. I may just leave the switch in. The way to get knobs off is to do this. Pull that around there, pull it up, it should pull off. There's a way to do it without scratching the pickguard. There we go. I've been thinking And then we'll take this loose pot here while we're at it. I'm going to turn this around where it faces the volume pot. And the reason why I want to do that is so then, once it's in there, I can take my pliers and I can clamp it in place. There we go. The idea is going to be to make these nice and tight. I'm going to take the output jack out though. There we go. And now I'm going to clean off the top of the pickguard where the pickups are and everything. Oh, shucks. Come on, come back up. There you go. Now I'm going to clean the pickups off. Going to be to take the pickups out. I'm going to try and avoid having to do any unnecessary rewiring if possible, because I played this guitar plugged in a long time ago and it sounded actually pretty decent. I am, however, going to replace that output jack. That thing is kind of abominable. Part of its tape around the edges coming off. And I can take these guys out, and then I can clean the back of the pickguard off. So you can see now it's all clean, and I'm going to do what I usually do. When I do the back of the pickguard, I usually choose to put one sheet of tape that goes about here first. And this is a little different because it's all flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pickups, I'm going to flip this over so that it's flat and the pickups are out of the way. I'm going to take a tool just like last time, I'm just going to run around the back of the pickguard. And that's how I shield these things. Very simple process, but it works incredibly well. So I'm going to run a whole stripe of tape down the back. Another secondary stripe for electrical shielding. There we go. And then I'm going to just do the same thing. Just work my way outward. Make it nice and flat. And the reason why I choose to do this is just that it's completely shielded. It's not just, you know, one side of the pickguard that's shielded, and you still have the thinnest point here, which is actually the most dangerous point to be left unshielded, not shielded. So then I take that. And I'm not afraid to overlap towards the center. I actually kind of prefer to do that just a little. You go, oh, but it doesn't lay perfectly flat. Actually, none of the pickguards ever lay perfectly flat. Even more true if you have a Jazzmaster, it's vintage, and you have a torque guard on it. I don't have one of those, but I've seen plenty of them. And then one last little section here, right there. And I'm doing that just because it's a little detail, and I like my details. Plus, it kind of provides a nice little spot for the potentiometer to really bond with its new shielding. Here we are. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my knife, and I'm going to cut around the edges of the pickguard. Look at that. Just cut around the edges very carefully and very slowly. See, it just cuts right through. Make another lift and cut there, and that's going to come right out like that. Just lift it up. There we go. And then we're ready for the next section. Just cuts out there. Yeah, and this is the trickier stuff to work with when it comes to this part. So, as you can see, There we go. Old bridge humbucker cavity is cut out. Then I'm going to take the neck position cavity and do that one. I just use this little thing as my guide. There we go. Go around the inside, go around the outside. Oh, they're coming for you. Alrighty. There we go. And there we are. We got the two little areas done. It's all shielded. Except for this. One last part of the job to be done is the outside, and I just do that by slicing, like that. Nice little slice out section. And then I do the same right where the neck pocket is, because there's some right there in the neck pocket that needs removed. There we go. So there we have a fully shielded electric guitar pickguard. Now I'm going to put the pickups back in. One of the screws go with the humbucker, the shorter ones go with the single coil. So pop a pair in the front. Here. There we go. And on these, same deal. Whatever they're pushing against is what I use to screw them in. And we are continuing with reinstalling the pickups and the shielding. I actually hit my maximum record time on Windows Movie Maker. That's never happened before. I think it was like 60 minutes is the maximum. So now we're going to screw that back in. Alright, and there we go, neck pickups back in. Now we're going to put the bridge position humbucker back in, which you got to be careful about the positioning of the pickups when you put them back in the guitar. If you put the pickups back in and they're not positioned correctly, you end up with that Peter Green, conky, out of phase noise stuff. And some people might like that, but typically most people don't use that sound. It was kind of hip in the 70s, but doesn't seem to really have much relevance in 2016, so I'm going to just avoid that. Just put that screw in. I'm probably going to look at this. Oh, come on. Go in there. Humbuckers are a lot trickier to install. A lot of it's just because of the screw, because of the length of the screws and the depth of everything. Basic fact that they're a little trickier makes them a little more annoying. There we go. There we go. And we just gotta get slotted in. There we are. Main part's getting it through the bottom. It's got some really tight springs on it. There we go. Then we flip that one up, and then we do this one. Base side screw. Flip it down, wide side towards the pick guard, thin side towards the thin little dog ears, like that. There we go. And that's how I just put those in. I just sort of screw it in place. Now, for the next part of this, I'm going to install a new input jack. So as we can see here, it now is shielded and it is now sitting in its pick guard. And it's all there you go. And that'll just fit right in the hole like that. Put that nut around there and screw that. Normally I use a lock washer on these, but in this case I'm not. I'm willing to bet the plastic one was just so that it wouldn't be as difficult for the people wiring the guitar. You'll actually fit it in the cavity and actually have it not short out on anything. Alright, time to test fit. Just drop it on there and see how it looks. Okay, will that jack work? Looks like it will. It's It's actually looking really nice now, so I'm going to take this back out. So I'm going to do one last lecture on electronics, another attempt at it. This one's going to be a lot faster. This is how your electric guitar works in electronics. You have in this guitar we have two pickups, a single coil and a humbucker. This is the perfect example to teach you what electric guitar electronics are. Now, I'm going to flip out in front. On this guitar, we have a very basic circuit. We have two pickups, a single coil and a humbucker, one volume control that controls the volume for all pickups, and tone that controls the volume for all pickups, and a three-way selector switch which allows you to enable one, the other, or both pickups. And then, of course, the output jack that everybody knows. Pickups are basically a magnet with wire wrapped around them, or as the case is here, they are a magnet with some pole pieces attached to it sticking through the front, and then the wire goes around the pole pieces. This is called a single coil. It's one coil of wire. Nice thing about these pickups, they sound thinner usually, and they are generally used in Fender-style guitars, vintage Fender-style guitars, Telecasters, Stratocasters, Jaguars, Mustangs, that kind of stuff. And they have that thin, Fender-y, twangy sound to them. But they also have a problem called 60-cycle hum, which is basically when you are on stage and there's high-voltage lights nearby, you hear that little noise in the background. Maybe not that loud, but you know. And then over here, so to alleviate that, Seth Lover at Gibson, back around 56, 57, 58, created the humbucker. This is like two single coils wired in series, sharing the same magnet. So you get a reverse wound, reverse polarity effect. And what that does is that it eliminates the hole that allows that 60-cycle hum to go through, to use a very basic explanation. Basically what it does is it just prevents it from getting through by providing no open phase for it to get through, i.e. there's no, I guess you could say, picture if you will, the 60-cycle hum can come in the opposite direction, like an oncoming train, interferes with your signal. This blocks both lanes, 60-cycle hum can't get in, hence the name humbucker, gets rid of that hum. Both of these pickups go to a three-way switch. Very cheap three-way switch, and the switch, depending on the position it's in, controls which pickup it's on. Over here is where the neck pickup is wired in, over here is where the bridge pickup is wired in, and they both share a common output point right here that outputs to the volume pot. When the switch is all the way forward, the contact is diagonal this way. I'll show you. It's diagonal that way, and it makes contact with the center lug, of course, but this one is the only active lug, and this bottom one is the only active lug. And so it'll only output from the neck pickup. If you flip it all the way the other way, then only this one becomes active and this one becomes active. And the center lugs are joined together in the center position by solder, so these are grounded off. So these two down here are soldered together, and these two upper ones are soldered together. So when you're in a center position, this is sitting center like that, and it's allowing the signal from both pickups to come through out that. It gives you an idea. And this jack is actually a weird jack, or this switch is actually a weird switch that's actually used by cheaper guitar manufacturers. I actually really like these in the 5-way configuration for Strats because they're really easy to use. And most of the older versions actually are wide open, so you can stick a file in there and file the contacts when they start going bad. So rather than replacing the switch, you can just clean the contacts. Okay, so this center wire here comes out and goes to this lug over here, the leftmost lug on the bottom of the pot. That's the input lug for the potentiometer. Middle lug is the output, and the right one is the ground. This one's grounded to the pot casing. The pot casing usually has a bunch of wires going to it on the volume pot. Usually both pickups ground wires and the ground wire that goes through the back and solders to the tremolo or bridge assembly, which uses your hand as sort of a grounding device. The center, on the leftmost lug here, it also outputs to the tone pot, which is this right here. it goes to the center lug, and then on the far right-hand side, rather than just grounding straight off on the pot, you have a capacitor. And what a capacitor does is it fills up with a certain amount of electric current and then releases it. And the amount of current determines the release rate, and the release rate of that current, once it gets full, determines the frequencies bled off. And when you ground frequencies off on a guitar, if you pass them off to ground, you're basically getting rid of them. So this grounds off all the highs, and it acts as a low-pass filter. It lets the lows pass through it. So that causes that warm, muffled sound when you turn the tone pot all the way down. If we did something different and passed everything through the capacitor and then out the output jack, then you get an effect more like the strangle switch on a Fender Jaguar. You basically end up cutting all the lows out of the signal and keeping the highs, and then you get that sharp ice picky thing. Pots are always joined together on the casings by shielding, or in this case the shielding I installed as well, and then it all goes to this output jack. And the output jack, just to show you, the connector, the very tip of this output jack goes to this lug right here, the very topmost one. That's the hot lead. That's the hot output right there at the top. The second part is called the sleeve. And the sleeve is this part right here where the input jack comes in and makes contact there. That's the ground. That's how they're typically wired. And that's typically how your electric guitar works. So anything going there goes to the ground, anything going there goes out to the amplifier, gets amplified, gets sent out your speaker. That's a very simplified explanation, kind of like a Ford Dummies. Now, I'm going to get to resoldering this output jack. So, I'm going to hang my crazy camera back up again, and I'm going to go to town on that. Typically, a lot of people use wire cutters on these. I actually just might slit it off to the side a little bit. Like that. Maybe a little more. Like that. And that'll expose some of the wire. Or, actually, I have wire cutters back here. There we go. There we are. So you want to make sure that you expose the leads before you do that. This is the hot wire. So this one is going to go to the lug here that goes to the output jack, which is the one that goes to the furthest to the bottom, this one over here. I'm going to turn that around so it doesn't interfere with anything. And then I'm going to just slip that through there, like that. I generally don't tin the connections very much on some of these, and that's okay. Well, typically most people tin the connections. I'm not going to be a bad boy today on my own wiring. Strangely enough, I have done that before. Oh, shit. All the circuitry works now. Put this back in. Go. So now we're going to bring the rest of the guitar up here, and then we're going to put the pick guard back on. So now we're going to reconnect the ground wire back to the pot. Then we're going to start putting the guitar back together. we go. Put that back in there. Route our wires through the channel here in the center. And then put the pick guard back on. Poke all these wires out of the way. And hopefully, shouldn't be any more issue with this. There we go. I'm going to do one last tap test before we screw everything down to make sure that pots are properly positioned. Cool. So that means we are good. And I can start putting this thing back together on the front. And then we'll start focusing on the tremolo. Putting new strings on and doing all that kind of stuff. Take all the small screws first. That wasn't a screw, that was a chunk of solder. So we're gonna, gotta stop them. So slippery. Polished it up too good. Put these screws back in. Make sure I don't goosh it away. I'm going to put all the screws back in. And then I'm going to condition, clean the fingerboard. And I actually checked it. Actually, the frets are pretty level, so I'm not going to bother with them. Actually looking and sounding pretty good so far. We'll put that in, put that on, that in, that in. This is like, put that in, put that on right there. Screw right here, and that should do it. There we go. Got that all back together. And we're going to put the tremolo unit back on it, and then I'm going to discuss some about Stratocaster trims. Okay, so now we're going to talk about installing Stratocaster tremolo. We've got 6 little screws here that we got to put in. 1, 2, 3. There's the 6th one. You have 6 screws, all of which go right here. And then typically what I do is take it forward, just like this. One of the things I actually picked up on where the fun stuff is when the machine stability is actually amplified with strings and some straight convolution. And it's pretty good sense to me. So that's what I'm doing. And only has 2 strings because 3 is tremolo. Start with. I'm going to add as many strings as needed because that makes it easier to play the guitar when it's done. This is one of the trickiest parts of this whole process, is getting that spring in. There we go. Just gonna push it in. And there we are. Before I do anything else, okay, now we've got the strings on it, the tremolo on it, everything works. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the action right to the buzzing point for each of the strings, and then we're going to set the intonation. So I'm going to lower the high E first and see how low we can go before it starts buzzing. It's typically so we're going to raise that up a little until it doesn't clink so much. We're going to do it just to the point where the saddle's level. It's going to buzz a little. I'm okay with it doing that a little. Sounds pretty good. We're going to check this one now, the B string. Neck relief, probably could use a little more, slightly. Alright, so I'm just going to keep readjusting it until I figure out what exactly we're going to do. Actually staying in tune pretty good. So I'm going to lower that saddle a little bit. I'll probably end up lowering most of these because this guitar seems like I can get the action pretty low before it really starts having problems. Right now it's actually sitting down there around that low level. I gotta tune that string down. And I'm going to lower this next one down a little bit. I'm going to get these just to where they just slightly buzz a little, just because I want it to be easy to play. Because you can get away with a lower action if you're going to do lead. And I'm going to set this up for lead guitar work. Okay, that one we're going to have to raise just a hair. because I can hear it's a little too low. There we go. It's getting a lot lower. We're gonna do the A string. Again, just a little bit slighter higher, slightly higher, like a fraction of an inch. Bad technique, I know, but okay, still a little buzzy. Raise up just a hair. And the low E can come down probably just a hair. And I'm going to bring that one down just about there, and that should be right. Check the controls. Sounds balanced. It sounds like the single coil is overpowering the higher strings with the lower strings just a little bit, so I'm gonna find my screwdriver because I got too much going on. There it is. And then I'm going to go ahead and lower the bass side quite a bit. About there, probably. Sounds a little bit like Nirvana. Alright, there we go. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the intonation. So we're going to sit here and we're going to wait until my crazy pedal is on the tuner. Now in tuner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the pickup selector all the way forward and turn the tone all the way off and the volume all the way up. Now we're just going to tune the strings up to pitch. It buzzes a little unplugged, but it'll sound good plugged in. Dang, I nailed the low E. It's like dead on. Dang nab. Okay, this is unbelievable. I know I don't have any visual proof of it here, but somehow, by some crazy way, I have managed to get the intonation perfect so far on two strings when I put the tremolo unit back together. What the heck? Wait a second. That one forward just a hair, and the G probably needed it. Yep, dead on. Didn't need that much. Weird, I've never worked on this guitar before, and somehow I'm managing to just nail it left and right. D needs let out a little. Not sure why the DE is so buzzy. Needs to go back just a hair. Okay, let's bug this thing. Now you gotta stretch the strings out. You always find little idiosyncrasies like that here and there. Okay, I see I have a string here on the headstock. The lines did not go around very neatly, so that causes tuning problems, and that was a fine example of that. Basically put the A string did not coil up neatly, and therefore it's not doing as it should. Now if I coil it up neatly, because I'm not in a hurry this time. Let's see here. I can't wait to plug this thing into the big amp in the living room. See how it sounds on that. It's gonna sound awesome there. We're getting a little more A string on it. We're just getting each string on its equilibrium. If you're using a tremolo, you don't want to stretch them out too much, or what ends up happening is they end up going sharp. You don't want to stretch them out too little, or they will go too flat. And so what I'm doing here is I'm stretching them out just right. So let's pull the D now, which is nicely coiled. There we go, we got that one, G string, we'll do that one all the way down the neck. then we're going to take one last look at the back. I don't need to do any adjustment. If I pull the bar back, it's totally stopped by the thing, so we're going to put the back cover back on. We get up in there. And there we go. And there we are. We're all done.